Well, today's a brand new start of a series. I'm going to call it Love Incredible. Greg Boyle writes in Tattoos of the Heart, God can get tiny if we're not careful. He had a friend that his dad was dying of cancer, so he took off work to care for him. And Dad had become so frail that he couldn't walk around very much at all anymore, and he was caring for him, and he would put him to bed, and they developed this ritual in his last days. In the evening, he would put him to bed, and as is common with adult children, as their parents age, then sometimes there's a role reversal, and he would put him to bed, and he said, Dad, now I'm going to read to you until you fall asleep. And sorry if I get emotional about this. I'm going to also come back at the end, wrap this with another story from his book. This book has just been tearing me to pieces. You might want to get it, Tattoos of the Heart. Well, anyhow, he's talking to his dad, and he's reading to him, and his dad's like just looking at him and smiling. And finally, his name's Bill. Bill says to his dad, Dad, come on. You got to go sleep because I'm exhausted from the day and you just got to go sleep. You got to cooperate. So his dad nods his head and he closes his eyes. He can't stand it very long, and pretty soon he opens one eye and he smiles at his son. And son catches him and says, Dad, come on. You got to go to sleep. So Dad nods his head and he obliges and closes his eyes, and pretty soon he opens the other eye and smiles at his son. And he said, come on, Dad, you got to go to sleep. And finally, they do this over and over again. He finally goes to sleep, and this happens every single day, every single night. And finally, his dad does die and goes to be with the Lord. And it occurred to Bill, and Greg Boyd writes about it. He said, it occurred to my friend Bill that all his dad was a man who couldn't take his eyes off his son, off of his kid. And then he said, it taught me, Bill said to Greg, he said, it taught me that God never takes his eyes off of us. And he's always smiling. That really touched me, and started reading these stories in there, and I'm thinking about how great God's love is for us. You know, no matter what you're going through, God's love is way more than what we could ever even think or imagine. It's way beyond that. So as we get into this, and we're just going to try and scratch the surface about this kind of love, not just the love that He has for us, but the love that we have for each other, and how to walk in that love, because it'll completely change our lives. I want to first give you 7 types of love. A lot of you might be familiar with this, so it might be review, and that's okay. We need to review a lot. Several of these are in the Bible. This is coming from Greek language, from Aristotle and Plato, and you can scratch these down if you want. But here they are. I just want you to look at this prism first. And this is really what we're looking at when we look at the love of God. We're looking at a prism when we separate them. The Greeks love to separate things. So they like to analyze things. So they would look at something and they would analyze it and separate so they could understand the parts more. But they're really a whole. They're a whole. And the same thing with light. You see white light. I learned something when I was, pastoring. You learn all the time, and I learned as we were renovating this building and we were putting the stage lights up, and I learned. Now some of you already know this. You're band people, and you play on stage and stuff, and you understand this. But I didn't know this. But there's no white up here. It's all different colors, and then when you use all the colors, they become white. That's pretty cool to me. And I was like, really? I didn't know that when the guy was teaching me, the light guy. And so there's no white. There's just all different colors. But you can take that white light, run it through a prism like this, and you can see the different colors. Now notice that there is a green band there and a red band there. Red's not green, is it? Green's not red, but they're two separate, but they blend together and make yellow. You blend all of them and they make white. So you're looking at this in the same way with the love of God. There's different types of love. You can separate them out to analyze them and look at them, but you put them all together and what do you have? You have God. John got a hold of this walking with Jesus, and he wrote later, it says, God is love. God is love. Everybody say that. God is love. Let's say it again. God is love. So here's some of the aspects of that God that we love and His love. I've got 7 of them. The first one is the easiest one to understand. It's eros. And for eros, think passion. It's a sexual love. It's a passionate love. But think of it more than just in terms of sexuality. Think of it as the kind of love that and the passion that God has for us. He has passionate love for us. And the closest thing that we can think of it is the passion that a man has for a woman or a woman has for a man. They come together sexually, but God's not that, but He has passion for us. Okay, so that's eros. And then philia. For philia, this type of love, think friendship. Friendship, this philia type love demonstrates mutual benefit based on the goodness and the dependability and the trust of the people that they have grown to be good friends. Storge, for storge, this type of love, think oldest friends. Think maybe you've got some friends in high school. You know, I talk often with my wife about this. She grew up in St. Louis and Florissant, and she barely knows one person. She went to a huge Hazelwood Central, barely knows one person from there. And in fact, they went to school at different times and even their own class because it was so huge. I still have high school friends, friends from way back, and I look forward to reunions. I go to baseball games every summer with some of them, and it's just something that's kind of special. I mean, she didn't experience that, but those would be friends that have developed over time, and that's storge. That's a love that's developed over time, and it only happens through time. So that's storge. And you think about your relationship with God, that in time, how many of you, sounds like a silly question, but how many of you love Jesus more than you did 10 years ago? Because you just know how good He is, and it just takes time to get there, and nothing can substitute for that. So that's storge. And then this is the one that most people are familiar with. It's agape love. And for agape, think the kind of love that God demonstrates with just complete unselfishness. And that is what God is. He's completely unselfish in His love for us. And He demonstrates that continually in our life. It's universal, unselfish concern for the welfare of other people. And it means that it's not dependent on who's receiving the love. So agape can flow through you, and that person can really be a stinker. And that person could really be antagonistic. And this love, this agape love, just keeps on reaching out, keeps on giving, keeps on being unselfish towards them. That's agape. And that's the one that's used about God more than any other in Scripture, is that God is agape. He is completely, perfectly unselfish and faithful in His love toward us. 1 John 4, verse 8. John literally says, God is agape. God is agape. So in other words, God is love. So the word agape means this kind of unconditional, unceasing love that God gives. Fifth one is ludus. Ludus is a playful, uncommitted love. Its relationship in this kind of love is casual, it's undemanding, it's uncomplicated, but it can last a long time. Sometimes you see this type of love. And then the sixth one is pragma. For pragma, think practical. This is real practical. We love each other because it's just intelligent. We have this relation. We have this negotiation. It's practical. It's beneficial to both of us. And then the final one, because of our long-term interest that we mutually have. And then the last one is Felucia. For this one, think self-esteem. That you love one. You love yourself, and that's not a bad thing. It can get overboard, right? You can get pretty eccentric with this, but when it's healthy, it's a good thing that you love. Remember what the scripture says, and Jesus said, love one another as you love yourself. So a lot of people have very difficult time loving other people because they don't love themselves. They don't have high enough respect for themselves. They don't have a healthy self-esteem. So that's important too. But in all of this, love is the bottom line. Love is the bottom line. And we're going to talk more about that. Nothing counts without love. You can't go anywhere in your life without love. You can't go anywhere spiritually without love. You can't progress in your relationships until you progress in this love walk. It's not a bunch of feelings as much as it is a decision. And then the feelings come and go. But if you make a decision, I will walk the love walk, then God will honor that, and you will be surprised at how God uses that in your life. Now here's another scripture in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, Paul writing to the Corinthians, and he said, enthusiastically pursue and see to acquire this love, and make it your aim, your great quest. I love that. So living a life ruled by the love of God is what opens us up to walk in this higher life, God's kind of life, because God is love. It's the highest kind of living to constantly experience the blessing and power of God in our lives and our relationships. To live this way, though, you have to make a decision to yield to that love. That Paul writes to the Romans, he said, this love, that God is love, he has, it's beautiful the way it's brought out in the Greek. It's like a pail full of liquid, and he says that God has poured out his love into our hearts. I love that image that he takes his love and he pours it into our hearts. So this love doesn't have to come from yourself. It comes from him. It comes from heaven, poured out into us. This love is supernatural. It's beyond any power that you can ever experience in this life. It's supernatural. It's God. It's him. It's his nature poured out into you. And it can change every circumstance. It can help every situation. It's a different kind of love. It's amazing. So it's a decision that we have to yield to it. The love, listen, the love can be on the inside of us, poured out into our hearts, but we not yield to it. With every situation we're faced with, we have a decision whether I'll yield to it or I won't yield to it. So even though the love is there, it won't benefit me. It won't benefit the situation until I yield to it and I let love come out in my words and my actions. So I have to let love come out. I have to yield to it. That's what I'm going to talk to you about today. And you do it. Now, you think, well, that's pretty complicated, Dave. No, not really. And I want to give you the trick. If you could consider it a trick, there's one thing that we have to do in order for love to come out of us, and that's just hang out with God. That's really it. Because you hang out with him, you just become like him. He starts to grow in you, and that love starts to come out of you. So just daily hanging out with God and hanging out with him and reading his letters to you, that'll do it. That'll change the way that you think. It will renew your mind. It will help you look at your situations much differently. It will give you new wisdom on how to apply some of these things that we call wisdom. Let's go back to agape. Now here's a couple more things about agape love that are unique to it, that the other types don't have. Paul writes that love is greater than either hope or faith. That's amazing to me. Why is God's love greater than hope and even greater than faith? First of all, faith does not work without love. In other words, faith is dependent on love in order to work. So if my prayers are seemingly not being answered over a long period of time, that's the first place have I messed up to where I'm not forgiving somebody? That's the first place I check, and I usually can find it. I mean, you don't really have to check very deeply. Usually, the Holy Spirit can just alert you to it pretty quickly, and then you can correct it in your heart. And it doesn't take days. You don't have to labor it over it and just say, I'm guilty, God. I need to forgive that person. And then you forgive them, and then your faith begins to work again. It starts to starts to work again. Galatians chapter 5, verse 6 says, "For in Jesus Christ neither circumcision benefits anything nor uncircumcision, but faith works by love." Faith works by love. Can we say that? Faith works by love. Oh, that's one that we can memorize and put in there over and over again. Faith works by love. So you can really see that love would have to be greater if faith won't work without it. So love's greater than faith. Second, faith won't work without hope. You've got to have hope. New English translation of Hebrews 11:1 says, "Faith gives substance to our hopes." You have to hope for something for faith in God to work. You have to hope for something before your faith can give substance to it. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 again. "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." So if you don't hope for anything, then your faith has nothing to latch on to believe God for. So I want to encourage you, what are you believing for? What are you hoping for this year? What are you hoping for? Your heart is ready to believe if you begin to have a goal, have an aspiration, all kinds of words to describe it, but you have to have hope. The lowest state that I've ever been is when I lost hope. Hope is incredibly important and very powerful. I have to have hope, but you can see that faith and hope still aren't compared to love. They're not as strong as love. But faith can't work without hope. And faith is dependent on love in order to work. Now here, we're going to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and we're not going to go much further than this today. But 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is the passage, probably the most powerful words that Paul ever wrote. And I love these first few verses. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And this is out of the NIV version. You can follow along. "If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but if I don't have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a changing cymbal, clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but I don't have love, I'm nothing. if I give all that I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. So in these words, Paul is writing that even if I have all the powerful gifts of the Spirit manifested through me, that without God's love, it wouldn't do me any good. It wouldn't profit me at all. It would be nothing at all. Now think about that. If we understood all mysteries and all knowledge and possessed all wisdom, but we didn't have God's love in us, working through us, it wouldn't do us any good. That's what Paul's saying. Even after 18, we're going on our 19th year of distributing food to help people. If we don't do it in love, we don't have anything. With all the sacrifice that we've had, and I've watched people month after month sacrifice time and energy, money in order to do this, just to bring a cup of cold water to people that are hungry and thirsty, help our community. We did all that without love, and we got nothing. It's challenging, so challenging. But you can see why this God kind of love is so important, that it's our bottom motivation in everything that we do, no matter what we do. Some of you are in professional jobs, some of you are in service jobs, some of you are doing all different kinds of things, some of you are students. Everything that you can do in love. Because you love the people that you're serving with. You say, well, I don't even like them. Yeah, but this love is way beyond what you like or don't like. It's God's love poured out in you to serve. Jesus said, this is how people know that you follow me, if you love one another. Not if you're a big person of faith. Not if you have high aspirations and goals, which is important too, but if you love. So God's love is so important that we really need to know what it is and how it works now. So we're going to get into that, and then I'll close with a story or two. Why is this so important? Because I think sometimes you watch a little TV, you watch some movies, and you get this idea of what love is. And usually it's romantic love that you see on the tube most of the time, right? Wouldn't you agree with me? And we get this idea that everything's got to be like, well, I watch Hallmark movies. And it always turns out nice. You know, I never really feel bad about watching a Hallmark movie. Some of the others I've watched, I was like, oh, sorry, Lord, I didn't need to watch that. You know, if you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. I watch the Hallmark movies. We just have this illusion sometimes of what love really is. And God's love is way beyond that. I want to read this to you out of the Amplified Bible because it's so important to see it, all these aspects. But have you noticed that this lower type love, or one of these aspects of love, it's a little bit different. Natural human love can turn into hatred overnight. It can just change. But here's the thing about God's love. It doesn't change. It's just always there for us. No matter what we do or we don't do, He still loves us. All right, let's go into these passages again. This time, we're going to look at them. Well, let me read it out of the NIV first, and then we'll look at it in the Amplified. Here's the NIV, the first few verses of 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And this is describing what this kind of love is like and what it does and how it comes out of us. And here it is. And I want to warn you, this is going to be the most challenging few verses that you'll ever be able to read. And I also want to challenge you in another. Would you do this? Would you find some time today or this week, especially before you get out, before it gets out of your mind, write these down. You know the thing, not a computer, but a pen, and a 3x5 card. Write it down, because there's something about that. And just write these verses, the first from verse 4 through about verse 8, I think it is, on love, and put it somewhere that you'll see it. Change your life. Absolutely change your life. Put it on your fridge every time you're going in there for that whatever, and you see it right there, or you go brush your teeth and it's right there on your mirror. It's like you're trying to dot. It's right there in front of you. This will help more than anything. Here it is. Love is patient. Everybody say patient. See, this is God's love coming out of you. You know how God's love is going to come out of you? You're going to be very patient. You're going to be supernaturally patient. You're not going to know where this patience came from, because it's God. That's the agape love of God. Love is patient. Excuse me. Love is kind. You don't know where your kindness is going to come, because that person is being so nasty to you. And this supernatural love comes out of you. The more you're pushed, the more kindness comes out of you. It doesn't envy. It doesn't boast. It's not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. If I want to win, I need to walk in love. But where there are prophecies, they'll cease. Where there are tongues or spiritual language, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it'll pass away. God's love is greater than all these things that Paul lists here. Prophecy, spiritual language, knowledge. We won't need all those things at that time. Love is here, always be here. God's love will never pass away. Now let me read this to you. If that wasn't enough, let me read to you out of the Amplified. You know what the Amplified version does? It amplifies everything. Love bears up. I love the way it writes, though. It reads, love bears up under anything and everything that comes. Okay, here it is. Love endures long and is patient and kind. Love never is envious, nor boils over with jealousy. It's not boastful or vainglorious, does not display itself haughtily, and is not conceited. It's not arrogant or inflated with pride. Is not rude or unmannerly. Does not act unbecomingly. Love, God's love in us, does not insist on its own rights or its own ways, for it's not self-seeking. It's not touchy or fretful or resentful. It takes no account of the evil done to it. It pays no attention to a suffered wrong. It does not rejoice at injustice and unrighteousness, but rejoices when right and truth prevail. Here it is. Love bears up under anything and everything that comes. Is ever ready to believe the best of every person. Its hopes are fadeless under all circumstances, and it endures everything without weakening. How is that possible? Because God never gets tired. And His love is so, you can't kill it. You can't kill it. And so, with God's love on the inside of us, you can't kill it. His hopes are fadeless under all circumstances and endures everything without weakening. And love never fails, never fades out or becomes obsolete or comes to an end. I look at those verses and I think, Sometimes as a husband, I suffer a little bit. I have a good marriage, but sometimes I suffer. Put up with things with her, but I'm not always too kind about it. What does that mean? I got to grow in love. And I'm not a rookie at this. It's been 31 years. She would say the same thing. And sometimes she suffers because she has to put up with some things in me. Not as much as I put up with her. Just kidding. But she'll let me know. And sometimes she'll let me know in an impatient way. I know none of you guys have ever been there. And she'll let me know in no uncertain terms. Diane's pretty direct. And I'm okay with that most of the time. But you know what this says? This says God loves and endures long and is patient and kind. So you may be putting up with a lot, but are you patient and kind while you're putting it up? You know, when you're putting up with it. I told you this is going to be challenging. Love bears up under anything and everything that comes. Sometimes we come to the point where we just think or we say, or we have this thought, and we just say, I can't love him anymore. I can't love her anymore. Or I've had it. I just can't love her or him anymore. Or I just can't put up with this person at work anymore. I just can't go through it anymore. But love can. Love can. And you don't have to do it on your own. Love can. And it's more powerful than anything else. God's love can bear up under everything without weakening. And the only reason that that's possible is because God is love and He lives inside of us. I think about these words and I think about some of the things that I've thought and said, and you know, I'm running out of patience and things like that. And then it's not usually very long when I think about what God has put up with me. And then I get thinking, wow, He's God. He has to put up with all of us. That's crazy. And He's totally love. And look what He does every moment. He puts up with all of us. I'm glad He's God. So when I'm talking about this, I want you to understand. Please don't misunderstand. I've been there when it's tough. I know what that's like. I know what you have to put up with and have to go through in some of these situations in life. Life makes sure that you grow in some of these things. And so the uncomfortableness of life comes to us in these difficult relationships, difficult situations, so that we can grow. I don't know about you, but I don't like taking tests over and over again. I'd just rather pass this thing. You know, I don't want to go through that again. That's what I want to pass it, so I want to grow. So God help me to grow. Help this love inside grow and come out. Help me be patient. Help me endure this thing with the right attitude. Help me have faith and hope. But let God's love grow and come out of me and just let it so fill me that I'm just porous with His love. Whatever is needed at that moment. In other words, just like Paul wrote, enthusiastically pursue and seek and acquire this love. And I have to ask the question of myself, have I made it this my number one aspiration? Because it's so important to grow in this love. There cannot be anything more important than this love, this God love in me to develop and come out. Have I made it my number one pursuit in my life? I have to ask myself that question. And there's times I haven't. But I'm coming back to it now, hopefully leading us in this, that we'll make that our number one aspiration. And maybe even make it our number one aspiration after this series is done and in the box and we're thinking about some of these things. Maybe all year long we'll make this our number one goal. We'll grow in love. And we'll listen to God. How can I let some of these things go of people that have hurt me? Let them go. Know how tough that can be. And just let it go and not hold it against another person. And allow this love to reign. And allow my life to win because of His amazing, incorruptible love. Will I do that? I have to ask myself that question. Is that what this year is going to be about? Will I meet Him in this arena of love? So love isn't something that's so gushy and so, forgive me for just belaboring this point, but I think it's so important. Love is the hardest thing that you'll ever have to do. It will be the thing that challenges you in your gut like nothing else. Some of you know what I'm talking about. To legitimately and with everything that you've got, hold nothing against another person or group of people and bring that before God and completely leave it in His hands. And you are saying that, yes, Lord, every time I think of that thought, I'm going to be patient, I'm going to be kind, I'm going to be loving. Go through them, there's a lot of them, and see which one you're getting stuck on and say, okay, I'm having trouble with this. Isn't this what a relationship is really built on with our relationship with God? Isn't this where the rubber meets the road? Isn't this where, when we find those sticking points, isn't this where the real spiritual work takes place? It is. It is. I'll close with a couple stories. One's real quick, but pastor's wife, you know pastors aren't perfect, right? Well, this pastor obviously wasn't perfect, and he had a lot of hang-ups and problems, and his wife was just about ready to leave him, and he had mentally and physically was abusive to her, and she just had it. And so she was leaving, and they started reading these verses together, the ones that we just went over. And they would read them in the morning, and they would read them in the night. And they just read them. They didn't really talk about them. They just read them for a period of time. And after several weeks, the wife said, you know, every morning and every evening we've read those verses on the love of God out loud. And then she said, every single day since we've been reading these scriptures, my husband has apologized to me, and he said, I can't believe I mistreated you as I did, and I can't believe I said those things to you. So instead of allowing his flesh rule him, he began to allow God's love to rule and govern him. And in a matter of a few weeks, healing started because he learned to tap into this love that was in their life. It doesn't always go that way, but in this case, it saved their marriage. And she said, he's just become a different person. Not only has he become a different person, so have I. I realized that to a large extent, I'm to blame for him finally blowing his top because I just kept nagging him. I should have kept my mouth shut, but we're both different people now because the love of God has changed us. I love that. So Greg Boyle, the story I started with, he's a Jesuit priest, founder of Homeboy Industries in L.A. Wrote the book, Tattoos of the Heart. And he writes, names are important. After all, the main occupation of gang members is to write their names on walls. So, first day, this was back in 1979 when it was his first day. He's an older man now. But his first day teaching at Loyola High School, right in the heart of L.A., in the most dangerous part of L.A., where there's more gang violence than anywhere else in America and in the world. It's the heart of the most difficult place. He's on his first day and he says, I'm scared, in his words, poopless. And he's walking, he's a white man, he's going into this high school, and he ducks into one classroom, pops his head in there to an experienced teacher. He says, got any advice for me? And he said, number one, know all their names by tomorrow. And number two, make sure that they know you, not so much what you know. Make sure that they know you. He said, thanks. So what he began to do is he was teaching, and then he was a priest at the local diocese there, and he started to reach out to these gang members, and they would all huddle on each corner all over that area of L.A., and he would just walk. He said, I wouldn't spend a lot of time because the welcome was always chilling. And I would walk up to each corner with those gang members. There'd be 8 to 12 kids there. And I would just start talking to them and shake their hands. And if I could learn their name, I would use their name. And I would walk on. And he said, I really wasn't making much inroad into them. And this one corner I would go to, there was this kid named Cricket. And Cricket would just leave when he started to approach. And so I wasn't making much of an inroad to their hearts until they would get shot and they were wounded, they were in the hospital, and I would go visit them. Or they got locked up, and I would go to the prison, and I would visit them. And after I started visiting, then when I approached the corner, they'd start talking to me. Came to that corner with Cricket, and he would just take off on me. And so I did some homework, and I found out what his name was. His name was William. And so one day I was walking to the corner, and I was talking to him, shaking their hands. Cricket didn't leave. And so I came to him. I shook his hand. He actually let me shake his hand. And I said, William, how you doing today? It's good to see you. And he was as cold as you can imagine. And I didn't stay long, and I just walked away. But when I was walking away, I could hear Cricket say, priest knows my name. Priest knows my name. Things started to change. He says, most of my gray hairs have come from a kid named Speedy. And Speedy was the Evel Knievel of the projects. He lived on the edge, and he would be a thrill seeker, and the way that he took out his energy, he would get on the edge and even step into enemy territory on another gang's turf, and he would just start to taunt them and tease them, and then they start coming after him and start throwing stuff at him, and he was speedy, he was fast, he could outrun anybody. And then he'd run into the safe ground. He'd do that day after day after day. And one day, Speedy comes in. Father Gregory he's late to do Mass, and so he rushes into his office, and he's derobing and putting his robe on, getting ready with the scriptures and all that, and he's getting ready to minister, and Speedy pops in the side door, puts his elbows on his desk and his hand in his fist. He said, he called him G. He said, G, I don't really care if I live or I die. I don't really care. And Father says, well, this is going to have to do because I got to go minister here in a minute, but I just want you to know that I care if you live or if you die. He looked at him and said, okay. And he, out of there. Goes ahead and ministers. 3 hours later, he comes back and says, can I talk to you, G? And he said, yeah, you can talk to me. He said, well, I hope I don't make you red because, every time I go over there and you chasing me, and what he would do, he would catch him every now and then, taunting and teasing, and he would chase him back to safety. And he's a priest, but he cusses like a sailor. It's just amazing. It's a really good book. And he just cusses him. He just cusses him back. Do you want to effing die? And he says, man, I care about you. You're trying to kill yourself. And he chased him into safety. Well, he did that over and over again. One day, he's doing this, and he chases him back. And he's just so upset. He gets really red in the face. And so he pops in this day and he says, gee, I don't want to make you red in the face again, but I just want to tell you what I did. And he's like, what did you do now? I said, well, I walked Carla home. Now, Carla's a member of the other enemy gang, one of their girlfriends. And so he walked her in enemy territory, walked her home, dropped her off at her house or apartment. And then he was walking back, and there were 8 of those rival enemy gang members, and they're salivating. They're going to kill him. And he said, but I blew him away, left him in my dirt, and left him in my dust, and I got out of there. And when I wanted to tell you this, not because I'm so fast, but because when I got on to safe territory, I ran into Yolanda. And Yolanda said, Speedy? And he doesn't know her that well, and she doesn't know him that well. He said, Speedy, if you ever got hurt, or if you ever got killed, it would break my heart in two. Because I've watched you with your nephew. I know you care. I know you care about people. And I've watched you at church, and you're helping the homeless, and you're helping feed people. And if you got killed, it'd just break my heart in two. Okay. And so he comes in, he says, gee, he said, when she said that to me, he taps his heart. He said, now I'm not going to use the word because we're in church, but he said, that crap made me feel good. And he used the S word, okay? He said, that crap made me feel good. A little bit later, he moves. He marries a girl named Carla. They move, and they got 3 kids. And he calls them. And they start talking on the phone. He said, I want to take you to dinner. So he comes back to the hood, and he takes them to dinner. And they're having a good conversation, talking about old things. And then Speedy said, well, Greg says, tell me about your life. He said, well, I got a job. I'm working. And I got 3 kids. Can I tell you about my Sundays? He said, yeah. He said, well, we go to church. And after church, we go to Mimi's Cafe. And the kids can get anything that they want. And I got a little bit of money. I can pay for it. And then after church, we go to Barnes & Nobles, and they got some sweet, comfortable chairs there. And we just sit there and read books, and I'm cheap, so I don't buy any of them. But the kids don't know that, and they just read. And I got an older one, and a middle child and a little baby, and I'm just watching them. And then pretty soon it's time to go, and we go, we leave. They put the books up. They know we'll just pick this up next week, and they do, and we do. And well, one week they just started begging me to buy this series of books, and so I said, what the heck, I'll buy them for you. So we bought this series of books, and then we go home, and now we've been reading them at home. And gee, what I do, I sit in my chair, and my oldest will read a paragraph. Then they pass the book, and my next youngest will read a line, and then my baby will try to read one sentence. And he said, I lean back on my chair, and I close my eyes, and I'm thinking, my kids are reading. And I'm experiencing this. And he doesn't realize that where his story is taken to him emotionally because he's tearing up. And Father Greg reaches over and grabs him by the arm and says, Speedy. Through his own tears, he says, you've got a good life. You've got a good life. And Speedy looks at him, gee, I do. That's what the love of God will do. I'm sorry. I was just so touched by that. I threw that book down, picked it back up, threw it back down. It's just a mess. But that's what we all have the opportunity to do, is to grow in this love. It will completely change us. People will be amazed. It'll save some people, the love that you're going to love people with. Let's stand. Father God, we come to you with our hearts. We ask that your love does increase in our hearts and that you will give opportunity for it. In Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. You guys have a great day. Have a great day. God bless.